Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Your Family Wealth, the show that deals with all things related to wealth planning, wealth protection and wealth transfer. I'm Remy Ayala. Before I start the show, please give me a moment to acknowledge the struggle for racial equality going on around the world.
Coming up, the Family Wealth Quiz. Answer at the end of the show. Topic of the week, case history, guest expert, tip of the week.
As always, I have a show packed with lots of useful information and tips. Coming up is my topic of the week, and this week it's business lasting powers of attorney. And I'll be introducing another harrowing family inheritance battle in case history. Then I have Aurelia Casatli from the Charities Aid Foundation to continue the discussion about philanthropy. And of course, you mustn't miss my tip of the week. But first, it's time for the Family Wealth Quiz.
What is the threshold above which you have to pay inheritance tax? Is it £250,000? £350,000 or £325,000? Answer at the end of the show.
Remember to watch till the end of the show to find out the answer. Last week, I explained how to create lasting powers of attorney. This time, my topic of the week is business lasting powers of attorney, and I'm going to take you through the things you should be aware of and the things you need to know when you create them. Imagine a young entrepreneur, Mike, who's fit and well. He goes out for a run as he does every other day. He collapses, and for the next few weeks, he's in ICU fighting for his life. If that happened to you, would there be someone to make decisions regarding your business during that time? To access bank accounts? To pay suppliers? To pay employees? Deal with insurance issues? Ensure orders are met? And also that production lines continue? Your business may well grind to a halt if that happened to you. In one case, the business owner was stuck in Iceland during the volcanic ash issue a few years ago. There were some contracts that needed to be signed, but there was nobody to do it. There were also some supply chain contracts and new employees. He lost all his employees and also a major contract because he was unable to fulfill them. Could that happen to your business as well? What about this letter in the Financial Times asking for advice? The letter reads, "My mother has early onset dementia and her health is rapidly deteriorating. She is the sole director and shareholder of our family business, which she founded from scratch. She made a great success of it, but what can we do?" There are two types of lasting powers of attorney, as I mentioned in the last episode. There's the one for property and financial affairs and one for health and welfare. The business LPA is the same as the one for property and finance. The only difference is that with the business LPA, you say that the attorneys should only make decisions in relation to your business. Think of it this way. You're going to have one for property and finance, and that one will deal with your personal financial affairs. Then you'll have a separate one again for property and finance, but with that one you'll choose someone to deal with your business affairs, and you'll say that they can only make decisions in relation to your business or your company. So in preparing the business LPA, you have to think about who to appoint as your attorney. It should be someone you trust, someone that you feel has the necessary skills to carry out the required tasks. The person should be someone who knows something about your business, or at least has an understanding of the kind of business you run. Apart from preparing the LPA, getting it signed and registered, it's important that you have a memorandum of wishes and that you keep it updated. What should you include in your memorandum of wishes? Well, everything that you think your attorneys should know about your business, such as plans for the business, where you see it going, the kinds of customers you deal with, and other such information. You should also keep your memorandum of wishes updated as the business changes and your goals change. You may, for example, want the business to be sold after a number of years, or you might want to bring in investors. You should include all of that in the memorandum of wishes to guide your attorneys. As part of the process, you'll have to review your articles of association if it's a limited company, or the shareholders agreement, or if it's a partnership, you might have a partnership agreement, but you have to review it. Why? Because you have to make sure that the articles or the agreement doesn't contradict the LPA. You may already have provisions in there regarding what should happen if a director or partner becomes mentally incapacitated. You may have to change the articles or the agreement to make sure that they're consistent with the LPA. They should also allow your attorneys to be able to exercise all your rights as a shareholder or partner if you lose mental capacity. In addition, they should allow the attorneys to appoint a director in your place if that's required. But do make sure to give the attorneys some guidance on who they should appoint as a director, and also the other things that you want them to be able to do on your behalf. In my earlier example of Elsie with early onset dementia, it may already be too late for her to make an LPA. And of course, in John's case, he's lying in ICU. If he doesn't already have an LPA, then it's much too late. The only option is for someone to apply to the Court of Protection to be appointed a deputy for the person who lacks mental capacity. You might think, well, there's always that option, but don't. It has so many drawbacks. First, it's not someone that you've chosen that will make the application, so it may well be somebody that's not ideally suited to run your business. Second, you're no longer in a position to give that person guidance regarding what you want. Plus, the process is much longer, probably 4 to 6 months. During that time, your business may have ground to a halt. It's also much more expensive because of the long process, and also the court fees are higher. The person applying for the LPA also has to have an insurance bond in place, so it's altogether really onerous and not many people will want to do it. It makes much more sense to make your business LPA when you're in a position to do it. I hope I've given you a sense of the importance of having a business lasting power of attorney as part of your business continuity and business succession planning. It's critical to the business because you don't know when it will be needed, and even if you have partners or other shareholders in the business who will continue to run the business, you should also have somebody to protect your interests at a time when you're mentally incapacitated. For sole traders or sole directors, it's an absolute must, as your business is likely to come to a crashing halt if there's nobody there to run it in your place. Next is another harrowing case coming up now on Case History. As always, I will introduce the case, but you can watch the rest of it in a separate video. The link for the video will be at the end of the show. This is a sad tale of a farming family, the Haberfields. It's centered around the estate of the late Frank Haberfield and the family farm Woodrow in Somerset, worth around £2.5 million. The main characters in this case were Frank's widow, Jane, and the daughter, Lucy. They had 3 other children, 2 of whom featured in this case, Andrew and Sarah. The other didn't feature very much. This case will rip the family apart, pitting mother against daughter, with the rest of the family having to take sides amid tensions going back many years. The main issue in the case was Lucy's claim that her father Frank had made assurances to her that he would leave her the family's farming business. She said that she had relied on the assurances, working long hours for some 30 years on the farm, taking very few holidays with little pay. But when Frank died, it turned out that he owned the farm jointly with his wife, Jane. Lucy was left out in the cold, and that meant that all those years of early morning rising at 4:30 a.m. to milk the cows had come to naught. She decided to bring this claim for Woodrow Farm against her mother. The saga would run for many years, with the judgment initially going against the mother, and then she appealed to the Court of Appeal. I shudder to think what they must have spent on this litigation. This was a very hard case for all involved. There was Lucy, who gave 30 years of her life to the farm. There was Jane, her 82-year-old mother, who would have to leave her home of 40 years. There was her brother Andrew, who stood to lose the land on which he had built his machinery business. Would the Court of Appeal agree with the first judgment? Or would they allow the mother's appeal to succeed? Is there anything we can learn from this case? Don't forget to watch the rest of this week's case history right after the show. The lesson from this week's case is to get the family together and reach an agreement on your family business succession. This case was about a farming business, but it doesn't matter what kind of business it is. The main thing is that with family businesses, there will be expectations among certain members of the family. It's best to sort these things out in advance rather than leaving your family to deal with this kind of ruinously expensive litigation that's in the judge's words. The link for this week's case history will be at the end of the show. Don't miss it. It's time now for my guest expert. The philanthropic spirit sweeping the nation is just palpable. All over the country, people are still willing to give in large numbers to fundraising efforts. Joining me today to continue the conversation which we started in last week's episode on philanthropy is Aurelia Gasatli, a senior manager, private clients at the Charities Aid Foundation. Welcome, Aurelia.
Hi, Remy. Thank you for having me.
Right. So, Aurelia, I wanted to say that I gather that CAF has been having non-stop conversations with people willing to assist in these COVID times.
Yes, you're right. It's been very busy for us, and we've had a lot of clients really just very keen to get money out to charities and people in need. And in fact, if you compare the volume of this year's donations with last year's donations in March, they're up by over 200%, which is phenomenal.
That's absolutely amazing. But the first things first, what is CAF and what does it do?
That's a very good question, because we mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we help corporates and individuals with their philanthropy and providing them with a streamlined and easy way to give to charities all over the world. We support the development of civil society in the UK and worldwide. We have global offices. We do a lot of policy and advocacy work in the UK around a favourable environment for the charitable sector to operate in. We do social investment, and we also have a bank. And as you mentioned, I'm in the private client team, so that means I work with high net worth individuals who use CAF to manage all or perhaps part of their charitable giving in the UK.
But I take it that CAF is not just for high net worth individuals and anybody can donate through CAF.
Absolutely. We have thousands, over 10,000, I think, what we call CAF account holders. So that's a CAF account which people like you and me, not high net worth individuals, can donate to every month or whenever convenient and make donations out to charity. And it's a convenient way to kind of collect all of your charitable money together and manage it in sort of one central way. And we also do a lot of payroll giving for companies. So that's Give As You Earn schemes and that kind of thing on behalf of employees for sort of big companies, big and small companies all around the UK as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really sensible way to manage your giving. Now, moving on to the Sunday Times Rich List. I know CAF is a sponsor of that, and this year's list has just recently come out, and they have a section on philanthropy. Any insights you can share on that?
Yes, absolutely. This year's list was a very interesting one for a number of reasons. So, as you say, there's the Rich List, and then alongside that, the Sunday Times published the Giving List, which ranks the top philanthropists in the UK according to what percentage of their wealth they give away or have given away. And this year, the list was really interesting for a number of reasons. One, because there was a lot of response from the general public in terms of why the Sunday Times was even deciding to do a list like this at this time when there's so much strife and anguish and growing levels of poverty. And indeed, in compiling the list itself, at the beginning of the process, when the journalists were doing research and collecting the net worth and assessing that of various people on the list, to the end of it, when it was finally released, there were changes simply in a matter of weeks because of the value of people's assets fluctuating wildly. So that was sort of a very interesting and unusual thing for them to contend with. And then on top of that, it highlighted the scrutiny and the increased attention that's being paid to high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, particularly now as everyone really wants to understand how these individuals are going to help this crisis. What charities have they supported? How much money are they giving? How does this stack up against how much they're worth? And how are they running their businesses in this time? Are they furloughing a lot of staff? Are they taking bonus cuts themselves? And so I think it will be very interesting to see next year how that attention has changed or not, and how people on that list have responded to the crisis, if at all.
And how generally are you finding that donors and philanthropists are responding to the COVID crisis?
So in a lot of the conversations that we've been having with our clients, and I think I can really only speak to that, we've noticed that there's an increased desire perhaps to be more strategic and long-term and considered in their giving, because they understand that the needs, particularly now, is enormous, and all sorts of groups of people who maybe wouldn't have been affected by this kind of thing in the past really are now increasingly in need. And so they're very keen to understand where their money can make the most difference, if there are elements about their giving behavior that they should change. And I think that this presents us with a really good opportunity as well, because, and indeed CAF will be doing some research on this, but it is possible that some of the sort of typical behaviors and perceptions of philanthropists and indeed grant-making organizations, perceptions around having low overhead costs, for example, or not funding unrestricted, not giving unrestricted grants, making sure that funding is very prescriptive and for specific programs. That kind of behavior, it does hinder charities potentially from investing in themselves, investing in the digital technologies that they need, developing contingency plans if something goes wrong, and really having sort of a runway of available, unrestricted funds to pay people and to manage in times like this. And I think, there's an increasing connection between how people are funding organizations and then what those organizations are able to do. And so that is a really interesting and very positive development that I welcome, and something that we're focusing on a lot at CAF as well.
Well, that's really good. And what do you see the future holds for the sector?
I think it's still very much an unknown, but I do think that there's a lot of potential for the reasons that I just mentioned. And I think it's really about thinking, how can charities themselves be better structured and be better resourced for the future? How can they work with their donors better so that they get the type of funding that they need? And indeed, how can the other side of that, so donors and grant-making organizations themselves, how can they make sure that they're funding charities in the way that best sets them up for success? And I think that's a very exciting time to be part of, because although it's also an awful period where many, many charities may close and the sector has been very badly hit, it also presents us with the opportunity to reset and to do things potentially a little differently and better in the future.
Thank you. And just as a final word, what would you like to leave us with?
I suppose just to say that despite obviously the gloom and doom and the turmoil that we are all experiencing right now, I am also quite optimistic, simply because it presents us with the opportunity to do something different. And I think that it's an important lesson to all of us who work in philanthropy to really strive to do better for the organizations and for the people that we are trying to help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Details of how to contact CAF will be coming up shortly. Here's my tip of the week. Have you taken out life insurance? If you have, or if you're thinking about it, make sure it's written in trust. If you do, there will be no inheritance tax charge when the policy pays out on your passing. If it's not written in trust, the proceeds will be paid to your executors as part of your estate, and there will be an inheritance tax charge on it. For example, for an insurance policy worth about £100,000, your loved ones will have to pay up to £40,000 to the taxman, all because you didn't tick the box on the insurance form asking if you wanted it written in trust. A very expensive mistake to make. So my tip of the week is make sure your insurance policy is written in trust. Coming up next is the answer to the Family Wealth Quiz. Let's see if you got it right.
What is the threshold above which you have to pay inheritance tax? The answer is £325,000.
I'm afraid that's it for this week's episode. Next time, the topic of the week will be estate planning for digital assets, and my guest expert will be Stephen Pitcher, a financial advisor with St. James's Place. He will be talking about pensions and asset preservation trusts. You mustn't miss it. Don't forget to watch the rest of this week's case history. The link is coming up shortly and is also in the description. Be sure to join me, Remy Ayala, next week for your weekly dose of family wealth wisdom. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe.